Imagine stepping into a factory in the late 1800s. The air is thick with smoke, machines roar without safety guards, and workers toil for 12 to 16 hours a day. No hard hats, no emergency exits, no compensation if injured. Workplace safety as we know it today didn't exist, but how did we get here? How did we transform our workplaces from death traps into safer environments? This is the story of workplace safety, a journey through history, decade by decade, to see how hard-fought lessons shape the rules and technology protecting workers today. Before the 20th century, workplace safety was an afterthought, if it was considered at all. The Industrial Revolution transformed economies, bringing factories, railroads, and mines into the heart of urban expansion. The booming industries demanded relentless labor, and workers, men, women, and even children, were thrown into dangerous environments with no protection. In textile mills, fingers and hands were regularly caught in unguarded spinning machines. In steel mills, workers faced molten metal burns and extreme heat, often collapsing from exhaustion on 12 to 16-hour shifts. Coal miners toiled in pitch-black tunnels, breathing in thick coal dust that led to fatal lung diseases, all while risking roof collapses and underground explosions. Across rail yards, brakemen lost limbs as they manually coupled rail cars together. By the late 1800s, an estimated 35,000 workers perished in industrial accidents each year in the U.S. alone. Injured workers had little recourse. If they lost a limb or their ability to work, they were simply dismissed, replaced by another desperate laborer from the growing workforce. Despite the staggering death toll, reform was slow, but small changes began taking shape. In 1867, Massachusetts passed the first factory inspection law, requiring some level of oversight in industrial workplaces. It was a modest start, but it set a precedent. In 1884, the U.S. Bureau of Labor was founded, tasked with documenting the grim realities of industrial work. Their reports detailed horrifying injuries, disease outbreaks, and the lack of basic safety measures in American workplaces. Railroads, one of the most dangerous industries of the era, saw some of the earliest safety improvements. The Safety Appliance Act of 1893 mandated automatic couplers and air brakes on trains, significantly reducing the number of rail worker injuries and fatalities. This law proved that federal intervention could save lives, an idea that would become increasingly important in the 20th century. The dawn of the 20th century was an era of relentless industrial expansion, but it came at a devastating cost. As cities boomed with factories, steel mills, and textile plants, workplace hazards lurked at every turn. Mines were among the most dangerous workplaces of all, with explosions, cave-ins, and deadly gas leaks claiming thousands of lives every year. By 1906 alone, over 3,000 miners perished in preventable incidents, buried beneath rubble or suffocated by toxic fumes. One of the deadliest disasters of the decade struck on December 6, 1907. In the small coal town of Monongah, West Virginia, a catastrophic explosion rocked the Monongah mine, instantly killing hundreds of men and young boys, many of whom had started working before their teenage years. With 362 confirmed dead, it became the worst mining disaster in American history. Investigators determined that coal dust buildup had created a massive underground fireball, a grim testament to the dangers of unregulated mining practices. Meanwhile, factory conditions were just as perilous. Workers crammed into poorly ventilated rooms, operating dangerous machinery with no protective barriers. Amputations were a daily occurrence, and fires broke out frequently due to overcrowding and flammable materials. Women and children suffered the worst conditions, often working 14-hour shifts for mere pennies, exposed to toxic chemicals and unguarded spinning machines. With no national safety laws in place, employers bore no responsibility for the dead and maimed workers they left in their wake. But as reports of these tragedies spread, pressure began mounting for reform. Small victories emerged. Some states introduced early workplace liability laws, and in 1908, Congress passed the Federal Employers' Liability Act, offering limited protections for railroad workers injured on the job. Though far from comprehensive, it was a glimpse of change to come. The second decade of the 20th century brought disaster, but also the first major waves of reform. In 1911, One of the deadliest workplace incidents in American history ignited a firestorm of change. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, a tragedy that claimed 146 lives in New York City, shocked the nation. When flames broke out in the cramped garment factory, workers found themselves trapped. Locked doors, a lack of fire escapes, and faulty fire hoses ensured that many never made it out. The public outcry was immediate. People took to the streets demanding safer workplaces, and legislators were forced to listen. In response, the state of New York swiftly enacted new fire safety laws, including mandates for sprinkler systems, fireproof doors, and unlocked emergency exits. It was one of the first instances where safety regulations were enacted directly because of public pressure. Other states soon followed, passing laws that required better working conditions in factories and offices. By 1913, the federal government took a historic step by establishing the U.S. Department of Labor. This marked the first time the government formally recognized workplace conditions as a national concern. The department's mission was clear: to advocate for workers' rights, investigate safety concerns, and push for new labor laws. Around the same time, states began adopting workers' compensation laws, a groundbreaking shift in labor rights. For the first time, injured workers had legal recourse, receiving financial assistance rather than being left destitute after workplace injuries. The decade ended with another major milestone: the formation of the American Standards Association in 1918. This organization set the groundwork for future safety regulations, laying the foundation for structured workplace standards in manufacturing, construction, and mining. Although many workplaces remained hazardous, the seeds of change had been planted, setting the stage for the continued fight for workplace safety. As the Roaring '20s ushered in economic prosperity, another movement was gaining traction: workplace safety. Factories were booming, and industrial output was at an all-time high, but with this expansion came increasing risks. The rise of unions and labor activism put mounting pressure on companies to adopt safety measures. Labor strikes and demonstrations became more common, with workers demanding shorter hours, fair wages, and most importantly, safer working conditions. One of the earliest breakthroughs in safety regulations came in the construction industry. The first building safety codes were introduced in 1926, setting guidelines for scaffolding, fire exits, and structural integrity in workplaces. This was particularly important in the rapidly growing cities where high-rise buildings were being constructed at an unprecedented rate. For the first time, construction companies were required to implement safer working conditions, reducing fall-related fatalities and injuries. Meanwhile, the mining industry, which had suffered from decades of deadly accidents, saw slow but vital improvements. The Bureau of Mines intensified its efforts to combat deadly lung diseases by enforcing dust control techniques. These measures helped reduce fatalities caused by black lung disease, a condition plaguing coal miners due to prolonged exposure to coal dust. Despite these strides, many businesses remained resistant to change. Safety was still widely viewed as an expense rather than an investment. Employers prioritized productivity over protection, and worker injuries continued to mount. However, the world was about to face a seismic economic shift that would reshape the corporate landscape. The stock market crash of 1929 sent shockwaves through industries, forcing businesses to recognize the importance of protecting their workforce. With unemployment soaring, companies that valued worker well-being had an advantage. Keeping their skilled labor force intact meant a stronger recovery post-crisis. This realization marked a shift in mindset, setting the stage for the next wave of workplace safety advancements. The Great Depression brought high unemployment, plunging millions into poverty. But it also became an unexpected catalyst for workplace safety reform. With economic turmoil came an urgent need for government intervention, and large-scale public works projects, such as the construction of the Hoover Dam, became symbols of progress and hardship alike. The Hoover Dam project, one of the most ambitious engineering feats of the era, employed thousands of workers in extreme conditions. While basic safety measures were implemented, such as requiring hard hats and respirators, the project still claimed 96 lives, a stark reminder that safety standards remained inadequate in high-risk industries. As the decade progressed, momentum for workplace protections continued to build. The labor movement, fueled by frustrations over job instability and poor working conditions, gained traction. Strikes and protests erupted nationwide, with workers demanding safer environments, fair wages, and job security. One of the most pivotal moments came in 1935 when the National Labor Relations Act was passed, giving workers the right to unionize and collectively bargain for better conditions. Legislation slowly began to reflect this growing awareness of worker safety. In 1936, the Walsh-Healey Public Contracts Act was enacted, requiring companies working on federal contracts to ensure a safe workplace. For the first time, industries tied to government projects were held accountable for worker safety, setting a precedent for broader labor protections in the future. Beyond legislation, technological advancements also played a crucial role. Around this time, protective respirators were introduced in chemical industries, significantly reducing exposure to toxic fumes in plants and refineries. This development was a game-changer for industrial workers, marking one of the first widespread uses of personal protective equipment, or PPE, in hazardous environments. By the decade's end, global events overshadowed domestic labor struggles. As World War II loomed, the focus shifted toward war production, bringing about a new wave of safety concerns in manufacturing, shipbuilding, and aviation. The lessons of the 1930s, however, laid the foundation for the safety advancements that would take place in the wartime years and beyond. The urgency of war production during World War II forced industries to prioritize worker safety like never before. Factories were running 24/7, and a strong workforce was essential for keeping the war machine operational. However, with this increased production came a heightened risk of injuries, chemical exposures, and fatal accidents. Employers quickly realized that reducing worker injuries meant fewer disruptions, ensuring a more efficient and productive workforce. To meet this challenge, safety committees were introduced in thousands of factories and manufacturing plants. These committees were tasked with identifying hazards, enforcing protocols, and training workers on best practices. This was one of the first major implementations of formalized safety culture in the workplace, a concept that would later become standard practice in industries worldwide. Protective gear also saw significant advancements. In aviation plants, where thousands of military aircraft were being assembled, flame-resistant materials were introduced to protect workers from fire hazards. Workers handling volatile chemicals and explosive materials were equipped with better respirators and protective gloves, reducing toxic exposure. In shipyards, where welding and metal cutting operations were constant, improved eye protection and reinforced gloves became standard issue. Meanwhile, the National Safety Council, OSHA's precursor, gained prominence, promoting injury prevention across multiple industries. Wartime necessity led to rapid innovations in personal protective equipment, or PPE, many of which would become standard safety gear in post-war industries. By the end of the war, the first hard hat standard was developed for construction workers. These helmets, initially designed for military use, were adapted for civilian work sites, marking a significant step toward modern PPE standards. The lessons of World War II made it clear, investing in workplace safety not only protected workers, but also improved productivity and efficiency, a realization that would shape the labor laws of the coming decades. As the post-war economy boomed, the industrial landscape changed dramatically. A shift in corporate attitudes towards safety began to take root. Employers started to recognize that protecting their workforce wasn't just a legal obligation, it was a financial advantage. Fewer injuries meant fewer disruptions, reduced compensation claims, and a more productive workforce. One of the most significant developments in workplace safety during this decade was the introduction of gas detection systems in chemical plants in 1952. These devices allowed companies to monitor airborne toxins, reducing exposure-related illnesses and fatalities. This innovation marked the beginning of industrial hygiene programs aimed at protecting workers from long-term health hazards. By the mid-1950s, safety slogans like "Safety is everyone's business" began appearing in workplaces across North America. Companies increasingly adopted formal safety training programs, and organizations like the National Safety Council played a key role in educating both employers and employees about risk reduction strategies. The push for corporate responsibility was gaining momentum, laying the foundation for the stricter regulations to come. The 1960s marked a turning point in workplace safety. High-profile industrial disasters, particularly in the nuclear and mining sectors, fueled public demand for stronger regulations. The decade saw the introduction of stricter safety laws in high-risk industries, particularly those dealing with radiation and hazardous materials. One of the most notable legislative actions of this decade was the passage of the Mine Safety and Health Act in 1969. After years of deadly mine collapses and explosions, this act finally provided federal oversight of coal mine safety. It mandated regular inspections, required ventilation standards, and established strict limits on coal dust exposure to prevent black lung disease. For the first time, miners had enforceable protections that significantly improved their working conditions. Meanwhile, the nuclear energy sector faced increasing scrutiny. The rapid expansion of nuclear power plants raised concerns about radiation exposure, leading to the first federal guidelines for worker protection in the nuclear industry. Companies were now required to implement shielding measures, conduct regular radiation monitoring, and provide protective equipment to workers. Throughout the decade, the push for workplace safety gained traction, setting the stage for what would become the most transformative change yet, the creation of OSHA in the 1970s. The era of voluntary corporate responsibility was transitioning into an age of government-enforced regulations, ensuring that worker protection was no longer an afterthought but a fundamental right. The 1970s revolutionized workplace safety. Injury rates were rising, and the demand for stronger government oversight grew. In response, the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 was signed into law, creating the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. For the first time, a federal agency was given the power to set and enforce safety regulations across all industries. The impact was immediate. Employers now faced real consequences for failing to comply with safety standards. OSHA inspections increased, and businesses were fined for violations. Workplace fatalities and serious injuries began to decline as companies implemented new safety policies and worker training programs. The decade also saw groundbreaking advancements in ergonomic studies. Research into musculoskeletal disorders led to recommendations for better workstation design, reducing strain-related injuries among office and factory workers. Meanwhile, personal protective equipment, PPE, became standardized, ensuring workers across all industries had access to hard hats, gloves, safety glasses, and respirators. A major milestone in OSHA's early years was the Hazard Communication Standard, introduced to address the growing concern over exposure to hazardous chemicals. Employers were now required to label chemicals, provide safety data sheets, and train workers on handling dangerous substances. By the end of the decade, the landscape of workplace safety had transformed. No longer was safety just a recommendation, it was now a legal requirement. The creation of OSHA marked a turning point, shifting responsibility onto employers to prioritize the well-being of their workforce. The foundations laid in the 1970s would continue to shape the safety culture in industries worldwide. The 1980s saw technology and workplace safety intertwining like never before. Industries began embracing digital solutions to enhance hazard detection, risk assessment, and worker protection. The decade also brought with it an era of regulatory reinforcement as major industrial disasters underscored the need for stronger safety measures. One of the most devastating incidents of the decade was the 1984 Bhopal disaster in India. A toxic gas leak at a pesticide plant exposed over 500,000 people to deadly methyl isocyanate, resulting in thousands of deaths and long-term health complications for countless others. This catastrophe sent shockwaves through the global community and led to a major push for stricter chemical safety regulations. In the United States, regulatory agencies expanded hazardous materials oversight, implementing stronger containment and emergency response requirements for chemical plants and refineries. With computing power advancing, companies started using digital modeling to design safer machinery and optimize workplace layouts. Industries such as aviation and manufacturing integrated computer-aided safety assessments, helping identify potential risks before machinery was even built. The push for ergonomics gained momentum, with new research emphasizing the impact of repetitive strain injuries and poor workstation design on long-term worker health. This led to early ergonomic guidelines, influencing the development of adjustable workstations and better seating in offices and assembly lines. Meanwhile, personal protective equipment or PPE saw notable improvements. Fire-resistant clothing became more widely available, and advancements in respirator technology provided workers with better protection against airborne contaminants. Across industries, safety culture became a more prominent conversation, with businesses implementing mandatory training programs and safety meetings to reinforce best practices. The decade's technological progress laid the foundation for an even greater transformation in workplace safety during the 1990s. The 1990s ushered in a new era of data-driven safety initiatives. With the rise of automation and improved digital tracking systems, companies could now monitor workplace injuries and near-miss incidents with unprecedented accuracy. This shift led to proactive safety measures designed to prevent incidents before they occurred, rather than simply reacting to them. One of the most significant regulatory milestones of the decade came in 1991, when OSHA introduced the Bloodborne Pathogens Standard. In response to the growing HIV/AIDS crisis and other infectious diseases, the standard required employers to implement protective measures for workers exposed to blood and bodily fluids. This was particularly crucial in the healthcare industry, where needle-stick injuries and exposure to contaminated materials pose severe risks. The regulations mandated the use of personal protective equipment, vaccinations, and detailed training programs to minimize exposure hazards. By the mid-90s, digital safety training programs began replacing outdated classroom methods. Companies developed interactive computer-based learning modules, allowing employees to undergo specialized safety training tailored to their specific job roles. This shift not only improved retention rates, but also standardized safety training across industries. As globalization expanded, international safety standards gained traction. The establishment of ISO 14001 in 1996 introduced environmental management systems, emphasizing the relationship between workplace safety and environmental sustainability. Businesses that adopted these frameworks not only enhanced worker protection, but also reduced their environmental footprint. The decade closed with another major technological advancement: real-time hazard monitoring. The increasing affordability of sensors allowed workplaces to track air quality, noise levels, and hazardous material exposure in real time. These systems, integrated with digital reporting tools, provided safety managers with instant data on workplace conditions, paving the way for the predictive safety technologies of the 21st century. As the new millennium dawned, technology revolutionized workplace safety in ways previously unimaginable. The integration of digital tracking systems, automated safety reporting, and real-time monitoring tools transformed how industries approached risk management. Companies now had the ability to track safety trends and anticipate hazards before they led to serious incidents. In 2001, the first ISO 45001 safety standard was introduced, offering companies an international framework for managing workplace safety. This standard emphasized proactive risk management and continuous safety improvement, providing organizations with structured methodologies to reduce workplace injuries and fatalities. Industries worldwide adopted these best practices, ushering in a new era of standardized safety management. The early 2000s also witnessed major advancements in PPE. Fire-resistant clothing became lighter and more breathable. Respirators were redesigned for better filtration and comfort, and impact-resistant headgear improved protection for workers in construction and heavy industries. These improvements made PPE not only more effective but also more comfortable, leading to greater compliance among workers. A major shift occurred with the rise of predictive analytics. Companies began leveraging data science to assess workplace hazards in real time, allowing for early interventions that prevented injuries before they happened. Safety culture moved from being reactive, responding to incidents after they occurred, to proactive, where potential risks were identified and mitigated beforehand. By 2008, online safety training programs became widely adopted, replacing outdated classroom-style instruction. Employees could now access interactive courses from anywhere, making safety training more flexible and accessible. Virtual reality simulations also began to emerge, allowing workers to experience high-risk scenarios in a controlled environment, enhancing hazard recognition and emergency preparedness. As the decade came to a close, the world saw a shift toward integrated workplace safety solutions. Digital dashboards, automated reporting systems, and interconnected safety devices laid the groundwork for the next phase of workplace safety, where technology and real-time data would drive decision-making like never before. The 2010s marked a major leap forward in workplace safety as artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation revolutionized industries. With more powerful data processing capabilities, AI-driven systems began monitoring workplace hazards in real time, analyzing vast amounts of data to detect risks before they escalated. Machine learning models identified patterns in workplace incidents, allowing companies to implement preventive measures that saved lives. One of the decade's defining moments was the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. The catastrophic blowout, which killed 11 workers and caused the largest marine oil spill in history, exposed glaring weaknesses in offshore safety regulations. The disaster led to a major overhaul of offshore drilling safety laws, including stricter blowout preventer rules, improved emergency response measures, and mandatory real-time monitoring of drilling operations. These changes ensured that safety failures in high-risk industries faced increased scrutiny and regulatory oversight. Advancements in wearable safety technology also became more widespread. Smart helmets with built-in sensors and augmented reality displays allowed workers in construction and manufacturing to receive real-time hazard alerts and navigation assistance. Exoskeletons, originally developed for medical rehabilitation, were introduced in industrial settings to reduce worker fatigue and prevent musculoskeletal injuries, particularly in sectors requiring heavy lifting and repetitive motion tasks. By the mid-2010s, automation and robotics were taking over hazardous jobs, minimizing human exposure to high-risk environments. Drones were increasingly used for inspecting oil rigs, construction sites, and electrical grids, reducing the need for workers to operate in dangerous conditions. Robotic arms and autonomous vehicles became standard in manufacturing, warehousing, and mining, performing tasks that previously led to countless injuries. As safety technology evolved, so did the understanding of workplace well-being. Mental health in the workplace became a critical focus, with organizations recognizing the impact of stress, fatigue, and burnout on worker performance and safety. Companies introduced wellness programs, fatigue monitoring systems, and stress detection AI tools to support workers' mental health and productivity. However, nothing reshaped workplace safety more dramatically than the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The rapid spread of the virus forced industries worldwide to implement sweeping health and safety measures. New sanitization protocols, social distancing guidelines, and contact tracing systems were introduced in every workplace, from office buildings to manufacturing plants. Remote work skyrocketed, reducing workplace exposure risks, but also raising new safety concerns around ergonomic home office setups and digital security. By the end of the decade, AI-driven hazard detection, predictive analytics, and virtual reality training had become staples in modern workplace safety programs. The integration of robotics, smart PPE, and real-time monitoring systems ensured that industries were not just reacting to incidents but actively preventing them. The 2010s proved that workplace safety is not a static goal. It is an ever-evolving commitment to protecting workers through innovation and adaptability. From the Industrial Revolution to AI-driven safety, our workplaces have transformed, but one thing remains: safety is a responsibility we all share. As we move forward, the lessons of the past must guide the innovations of tomorrow. The future of workplace safety will be shaped by rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, automation, and predictive analytics. AI-powered hazard detection will become even more refined, capable of assessing risks in real time with pinpoint accuracy. Smart PPE will evolve further, integrating biometric sensors that track worker fatigue, heart rate, and stress levels, preventing injuries before they occur. Exoskeletons and robotic assistants will become commonplace, reducing the physical strain on human workers and virtually eliminating certain types of ergonomic injuries. As global challenges continue to impact industries, workplace safety will also expand to include disaster resilience planning. Extreme weather events and air quality concerns will push companies to create adaptive safety protocols to protect workers from environmental hazards. Similarly, as remote and hybrid work models persist, new safety challenges will emerge, requiring employers to consider home office ergonomics, mental health initiatives, and digital security as key components of workplace safety. Perhaps the most significant evolution will be the cultural shift towards a proactive rather than reactive safety approach. Instead of merely responding to incidents, organizations will embrace a philosophy of continuous improvement, leveraging real-time data and automation to prevent hazards before they arise. The rise of workplace safety as a fundamental part of corporate sustainability and social responsibility will ensure that protecting workers is not just a regulatory requirement, but a core value of successful businesses. What will the next century of workplace safety look like? That's up to us. The decisions we make today will define the working conditions of future generations, ensuring that safety remains at the heart of every industry.